The unstoppable alien princess. They said no one could stop her. The name Princess Zyra was spoken in whispers across galaxies. She was the heir to the Zorathian Empire, the strongest warrior among her kind. With a single command, entire planets fell. She had led her army to victory countless times, never tasting defeat. Now her golden eyes stared at the small blue planet ahead, Earth, the last planet standing. She stood tall inside her ship, wearing a dark armor that shimmered under the artificial lights. Her long silver hair flowed behind her like a comet's tail. The War Council gathered before her, awaiting orders. "Earth's defenses are weak," said General Vekur, a towering alien with red skin and glowing scars. "Their weapons are primitive. Their soldiers are nothing compared to us. Victory will be swift." Zyra smirked. I expected more of a challenge. She had heard of humans. Small creatures, fragile bodies. They were not as strong as the Grolks, not as intelligent as the Kovarians, and not as ruthless as the Draxans. Yet, somehow, they had survived. Empires had tried to conquer them before, but failed. The Zorathians would not fail. Her ship descended into Earth's atmosphere, cutting through the sky like a blade. Below her, the last human stronghold. A ruined city waited in silence. Fires burned in the distance. Skyscrapers stood broken, like the skeletons of a once great civilization. Zyra stepped out onto the cracked pavement, her armored boots clicking against the stone. Her soldiers followed, their weapons humming with power. They expected to find a battlefield. But the streets were empty. No screams, no gunfire, no soldiers waiting to defend their home. It was too quiet. Zyra narrowed her eyes. Something was wrong. Her communicator buzzed. "Princess," General Vekur's voice came through, urgency in his tone. "Our scanners detect only one life form ahead. A single human. One." Zyra frowned. Had the humans already given up? Had they fled like cowards, leaving only one man behind? She motioned for her warriors to stay back and walked forward alone. She wanted to see this human with her own eyes. She turned the corner of a ruined building and stopped. There he was. The lone figure stood in the center of the broken street. He wore torn military gear, his face covered in dirt and blood. His stance was firm, like an immovable mountain. His eyes, cold and determined, locked onto hers. This was no ordinary man. Zyra studied him carefully. He had no advanced armor, no alien technology, no army behind him. He was just a human. Yet he did not look afraid. The wind howled through the ruins, carrying dust between them. The silence stretched. Finally, Zyra spoke, her voice strong. "Where are your people?" The man didn't move. He simply smirked. A flicker of annoyance crossed Zyra's face. He was looking at her, not with fear, not with desperation, but with confidence. "I am Sergeant Jack Carter," he said, voice calm, unshaken. "And if you're looking for a fight, you've come to the right place." Zyra's heart skipped a beat. This was the first time in her life she had ever doubted herself. The human soldier with no fear. She expected fear, but his eyes told a different story. Princess Zyra had faced many enemies before. Kings, generals, alien warlords. They all crumbled under her gaze. But Sergeant Jack Carter stood there, his smirk steady, his eyes sharp like he was looking straight through her. For a moment, Zyra felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't fear, but it wasn't confidence either. It was curiosity. She took a step forward, her armored boots echoing in the quiet street. The ruined city around them felt like a graveyard, and yet here stood this lone human, acting as if he was untouchable. "Your people are gone," Zyra said, her voice cold and sharp. "Your planet is lost. Surrender, and I will make your death quick." Jack chuckled softly, brushing dust off his torn jacket. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "You talk a lot for someone who doesn't know what she's gotten herself into." Zyra's golden eyes narrowed. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She had destroyed worlds for less. But instead of ordering her soldiers to blast him into ash, she found herself wanting to understand him. What made this human so different? "I could crush you where you stand," she hissed, stepping closer. But Jack didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "You could try," he replied. That was it. Zyra lunged, faster than any human eye could follow. Her blade, made from the rare Zorathian plasma, flashed in the air, aiming straight for Jack's chest. But at the last second, Jack dodged, rolling to the side and pulling out a battered, human-made knife. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying. Zyra's strength was unmatched. Her strikes were fast, precise, and deadly. But Jack fought differently. He wasn't stronger, but he was smarter. He used the environment to his advantage, ducking behind debris, forcing Zyra into narrow spaces where her strength was less useful. Each time their weapons met, Zyra grew more frustrated. This was supposed to be easy. Humans were weak, predictable. But Jack, he was something else. Minutes passed, the duel growing fiercer. Zyra's heart pounded in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. She was sweating, her breaths coming faster. Jack noticed. "Tired already, princess?" he teased, a grin spreading across his face. Zyra snarled, slashing at him with renewed fury. But Jack dodged again, landing a sharp kick to her side that sent her stumbling. No one had ever made her stumble. Zyra growled in frustration. She activated her plasma blade, its humming sound filling the air. She was done playing games. But just as she lunged for the final blow, Jack did something unexpected. He lowered his knife and stood tall, his arms at his sides. Zyra froze mid-strike, confused. "What are you doing?" she snapped. Jack met her gaze, his eyes burning with something she didn't recognize. Defiance mixed with something deeper. "I'm showing you," he said quietly, "that humans don't fear death. You can kill me, but others will rise. You can burn our cities, but we'll rebuild. You can conquer our world, but you'll never conquer our spirit." For the first time, Zyra hesitated. Her blade hovered inches from his chest, but her hand trembled. She stared into his eyes, and for a moment she saw something terrifying. Hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope was what had kept humans alive when they should have been extinct. Zyra stepped back, lowering her weapon. The words of her generals echoed in her mind. Humans are weak. But standing in front of Jack, she knew they were wrong. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a symbol. And symbols were harder to destroy than armies. Before she could say anything, Jack spoke again. "You think you're unstoppable," he said, voice low but steady. "But you've already lost, princess, because you've met me. And now, you'll never forget me." Zyra clenched her fists, anger and confusion swirling inside her. She should have ended him. She wanted to end him. But something held her back. Instead, she turned and walked away, her soldiers watching in silence. As her ship lifted off, Zyra glanced down at the human standing alone in the ruins. His figure grew smaller, but his words echoed in her mind. For the first time in her life, Princess Zyra felt unsure. And she hated it. The battle begins. Power meets strategy. But who will break first? The air was thick with tension. Princess Zyra stood aboard her warship, staring at the desolate city below. The image of Sergeant Jack Carter haunted her thoughts. His words echoed in her mind, challenging everything she believed about humans. "You'll never conquer our spirit." No one had ever dared to speak to her like that. No one had ever made her hesitate. But now, hesitation gnawed at her like an unwelcome shadow. Her second-in-command, General Vecker, approached. His red skin gleamed under the ship's lights, and his glowing scars pulsed with impatience. "Why didn't you kill him?" Vecker's voice was low, but there was a hint of accusation in his tone. "He's just a human." Zyra didn't respond immediately. She stared out the viewport, watching the wind whip through the broken streets of Earth's last stronghold. Finally, she spoke. "He's not just a human." Vector sneered. "Then let me handle him." Thyra turned sharply, her golden eyes flashing. "No." The general flinched. Even he knew better than to question the princess twice. "I will finish this," Thyra said coldly. "He challenged me, and I will prove that no human, no one, can stand against the Zorathian Empire." The next day, Thyra descended alone into the ruined city, the sky above dark with storm clouds. Her soldiers watched from a distance, ready to intervene if needed. But this was personal. She found Jack exactly where she had left him, standing amidst the rubble like a sentinel. He saw her approach and smiled. "Back for more." Zira drew her plasma blade, its hum cutting through the silence. "This ends today." Jack pulled out his battered knife, the same one he had used before. "You're right. It does." They circled each other, eyes locked. Two warriors from different worlds, but bound by the same unyielding spirit. Zira struck first, her blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. But Jack was ready. He ducked, rolled, and countered with a swift jab to her side. She felt the impact through her armor, but ignored the pain. She was faster, stronger, but Jack was unpredictable. They fought like this for minutes that felt like hours. Thyra's advanced technology clashed against Jack's raw determination. Every time she thought she had him cornered, he slipped away, using the debris and broken streets to his advantage. Jack fought smart. He knew he couldn't match her strength, so he outmaneuvered her. He led her through narrow alleys, forcing her into tight spaces where her plasma blade was less effective. He baited her into traps, using the environment as his weapon. But Zira was no fool. She adapted quickly, her strikes becoming more calculated. She anticipated his moves, countered his tricks. The battle became a deadly dance, each of them pushing the other to the brink. As they clashed near a fallen skyscraper, Jack managed to disarm her, sending her plasma blade skidding across the ground. But instead of finishing her off, he stepped back, breathing heavily. "You're good," he admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. "But you're fighting the wrong enemy." Zira stared at him, chest heaving. She could summon her soldiers. She could end this now. But something stopped her. "What do you mean?" she demanded. Jack lowered his knife, his eyes serious. "You think humans are your enemy, but the real enemy is the one that sent you here. The one that made you believe we're weak." Zira frowned, her mind racing. Could he be right? Could the empire she had served all her life be wrong about humans? Before she could respond, a sharp voice crackled through her communicator. "Princess Zira," General Vector's voice came through, cold and demanding. "The High Council has ordered the complete destruction of the human resistance. Return to the ship immediately." Zira's heart pounded. She had a choice to make: obey the Empire, or listen to the human standing before her. Jack stepped closer, his voice softer now. "You've seen what we're capable of. You've seen our spirit. Help us, Thyra. You don't have to be their weapon." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The wind stopped, the distant sounds of war faded. All that remained was the choice before her. Zira looked at Jack, then at her communicator. The weight of her decision pressed down on her like never before. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady, but laced with something new: hope. "I'm not their weapon." She picked up her plasma blade, but instead of turning it on Jack, she smashed the communicator with it, cutting herself off from the Empire. Jack's eyes widened. "Does this mean?" Zira nodded. "Let's finish this. Together." The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. A human heart, an alien mind. In the heat of battle, a new understanding begins to grow. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a blood-red glow over the shattered city. Smoke rose from the distant ruins, painting the sky in shades of gray and orange. The quiet after the fight felt heavier than the battle itself. Princess Zyra and Sergeant Jack Carter stood side by side, breathing hard, their weapons lowered but not forgotten. The silence between them wasn't just from exhaustion. It was from something deeper. Respect. Zyra had never felt anything like it before. She had faced countless warriors, conquered planets, and crushed rebellions. But standing next to Jack, she felt small, not weak, but small in the face of something she couldn't understand. Jack glanced at her, his expression unreadable. The smirk he usually wore was gone, replaced by something more serious. "So," he said after a long pause, "what now?" Zyra didn't answer right away. She was still grappling with the decision she had made. She had defied the Zorathian High Council, destroyed her communicator, and chosen to stand with a human against her own empire. It was unthinkable, but it felt right. "We need to regroup," Zyra finally said, her voice steady. "The Zorathian fleet won't wait. They'll send more forces, stronger ones." Jack nodded, wiping sweat and dirt from his face. "Yeah, they'll come, but so will we." Zyra raised an eyebrow. "You really believe your people can stand against the Zorathian Empire?" Jack's eyes hardened, his jaw set with determination. "We don't just stand. We fight. And when we fight for something we believe in, we don't stop." His words struck something inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. They found shelter in a half-collapsed building, a former hospital, judging by the faded signs and broken medical equipment scattered across the floor. The air smelled of dust and rusted metal, but it was safe enough for now. As they settled in, Jack began tending to a cut on his arm. Zyra watched him for a moment, then spoke. "Why do you fight so hard?" she asked quietly. Jack paused, looking up from his wound. "You mean, why don't I give up?" Zyra nodded. Jack leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling like he was searching for the right words. "It's not about winning," he said finally. "It's about protecting what matters. Our homes, our families, our friends. Even if we lose, we fight because we can't let them down. Because giving up means losing everything we stand for." Zyra listened, her mind turning over his words. In the Zorathian Empire, warriors fought for power, for glory, for the expansion of their territory. But Jack, he fought for people, for something greater than himself. "What about you?" Jack asked suddenly, pulling her from her thoughts. "Why do you fight?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. She had always fought because it was expected of her, because it was her duty as a princess. But now, as she sat in the ruins of a world her empire was trying to destroy, she wasn't sure anymore. "I used to fight for the empire," she admitted quietly, "for my people. But now," she trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. Jack didn't press her. Instead, he handed her a small canteen of water. "Sometimes, you don't figure it out until you've lost something." Zyra took the canteen, her fingers brushing against his. The touch sent a strange warmth through her, something unfamiliar and confusing. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their choices pressing down on them. Outside, the distant rumble of approaching Zorathian ships grew louder, a reminder that time was running out. "We can't win this alone," Jack said finally. "We need to find the others." Zyra frowned. "Others?" Jack nodded. "There are more resistance fighters, scattered, hiding. But they're out there. We need to bring them together." Zyra hesitated. Trusting Jack was one thing. Trusting more humans, that was another challenge entirely. But if they were going to stand a chance against the Empire, they had no choice. "Then we move at dawn," she said, her voice firm. Jack gave a small smile. "Welcome to the Resistance, Princess." Zyra felt a strange flutter in her chest at his words. She wasn't sure if it was fear, excitement, or something else entirely. But for the first time, she didn't feel like a conqueror. She felt like a part of something bigger. and it scared her more than any battle ever had. Betrayal or honor? Her empire demands blood, but her heart says otherwise. The dawn broke over the ruined city with a pale, uncertain light. Princess Zyra stood at the edge of a crumbling rooftop, her golden eyes fixed on the horizon. The air was crisp, but the tension in her chest made it feel suffocating. Below her, the world she had come to conquer lay in ashes, but instead of victory, she felt the weight of a decision that could shatter her entire existence. Behind her, Sergeant Jack Carter was checking his equipment, his movements steady and calm. He had an unshakable resolve, something Zyra had never seen in anyone, not even her own people. Humans were supposed to be weak, easy to break, but Jack wasn't just unbroken. He was unbreakable, and that terrified her. Her communicator, now hastily repaired after she had destroyed it in a moment of rebellion, buzzed at her side. She had to respond. She had delayed long enough, and the Zorathian High Council didn't tolerate defiance. With a deep breath, Zyra activated it. The holographic image of Lord Commander Draxos, her father's most trusted advisor, flickered into view. His sharp, angular features and cold, calculating eyes sent a chill through her. Princess Zyra, Draxos' voice was like ice. Your silence has been noted. The High Council grows impatient. Zyra straightened, her voice steady but her heart pounding. I encountered resistance. A human soldier. Draxos sneered. One human delays a princess of the Zorathian Empire. I expected more. Zyra clenched her fists, the insult stinging more than she wanted to admit. But she held her ground. This human is different. Their spirit. Spirit. Draxos interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. Humans are pests. Their spirit is meaningless against our power. You are to eliminate the resistance immediately. No exceptions. Zyra felt a surge of anger, but it wasn't directed at Jack. It was at Draxos, at the empire that refused to see what she had seen. Before she could respond, Draxos leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. And Princess, if you fail to comply, you will be branded a traitor. You know what that means. The communicator went dark. Zyra stood there, the words echoing in her mind. Traitor. The title was worse than death in the Zorathian Empire. It meant exile, dishonor, the complete erasure of her name from history. But as she looked down at Jack, who was now adjusting a makeshift radio, she realized something. She didn't care. Later that day, they set out to find the remaining human resistance fighters. The journey took them through what was left of Earth's cities, once vibrant places now reduced to rubble and silence. As they walked, Zyra found herself watching Jack, studying him. His determination, his resilience, it was unlike anything she had ever encountered. And despite everything, she felt drawn to it. But the weight of her decision pressed on her. She had betrayed her empire, her people. The guilt gnawed at her, but the thought of returning to the empire, of becoming the weapon they wanted her to be, felt even worse. They finally reached an old underground bunker hidden beneath a collapsed library. Jack knocked in a specific pattern, and after a tense moment, the heavy door creaked open. Inside, a small group of weary but determined humans greeted them, their eyes widening at the sight of Zyra. Jack, one of them, a woman with sharp eyes and a scar running down her cheek, said cautiously, "Who the hell is this?" Jack smiled, though there was tension in his voice. "Everyone. This is Princess Zyra. She's with us." The room fell into stunned silence. "With us?" Another man spat, stepping forward. "She's one of them. You expect us to trust her." Zyra felt the weight of their stares, the hatred, the fear. She understood it. She had been their enemy after all. Jack raised his hands, trying to calm the growing anger. "Listen to me. She's seen what the Empire is doing. She's chosen to fight with us. Or maybe it's a trap," the woman with the scar snapped. "Maybe she's here to finish the job." Zyra stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead already." The room fell silent again, the humans exchanging uneasy glances. "I'm not here to trick you," Kyra continued, her voice softer now. "I've seen your strength, your spirit. The Empire doesn't understand it. But I do, and I want to help." There was a long pause before the woman finally nodded, though her eyes remained wary. "We'll see." That night, as the group prepared for the coming battle, Jack found Syra sitting alone near the entrance of the bunker, staring up at the stars. He sat down beside her, the silence between them comfortable. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Zyra didn't respond right away. She was thinking about Draxo's words, about the life she had left behind. "I betrayed my people," she said finally. "I'm a traitor." Jack was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice steady. "You didn't betray them. You chose honor over blind loyalty." Zyra turned to look at him, her golden eyes searching his face. "And what if I'm wrong?" Jack met her gaze, his eyes soft but filled with conviction. "Then we fall together. But at least we fall fighting for the right thing." Zyra felt a warmth spread through her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time, she wasn't just a warrior. She was part of something bigger, something worth fighting for. And she knew, no matter what happened next, she had made the right choice. The final stand. Enemies yesterday, allies today. But will it be enough? The sky above Earth was on fire. Flaming streaks of light cut across the heavens as the Zorathian fleet descended, their colossal warships blotting out the stars. The ground trembled beneath their sheer weight, their engines roaring like ancient beasts awakened from a deep slumber. The final invasion had begun. Princess Zyra stood atop the ruins of an old skyscraper, her golden eyes scanning the horizon. The once vibrant city of New Haven now resembled a graveyard, its streets cracked and littered with the remnants of humanity's last stand. But amid the destruction, there was something the Empire had never accounted for: hope. Below, Sergeant Jack Carter was rallying the human resistance. His voice, though hoarse from exhaustion, carried strength that seemed to seep into the hearts of every man and woman who listened. "We've faced worse," Jack shouted, standing on the rusted hull of an overturned truck. "They think we're beaten, but they don't know who they're dealing with. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for our future." The crowd erupted in cheers, a sound that echoed through the broken streets like a battle cry. Zyra felt a strange warmth in her chest as she watched Jack. She had seen leaders before, cold, calculating generals who ruled through fear and intimidation. But Jack led with something far more powerful: belief. She turned her gaze back to the sky, where the lead Zorathian warship hovered ominously. Her communicator buzzed at her side, a cold reminder of the Empire she had betrayed. "But this time," she answered. The holographic image of Prince Farron, her brother and heir to the Zorathian throne, materialized before her. His sharp, angular features mirrored her own, but his eyes were devoid of the compassion she had found among the humans. "Syra," Farron sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "I see you've chosen your side. I've chosen the right side." Zyra shot back, her voice steady. Farron's eyes narrowed. "You've betrayed your blood, your people. For what? These weak creatures." He spat the word like it was poison. "They're stronger than you'll ever understand," Zyra replied. "And they'll fight to the last breath." Farron's sneer deepened. "Then they'll die with you." The communication cut off, leaving only the hum of the approaching fleet. Back at the bunker, Zyra found Jack reviewing maps with the resistance leaders. The room was tense, filled with the weight of what was coming. "They'll be here by nightfall," Zyra announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Jack looked up, his eyes meeting hers. There was no fear in them, only determination. "Then we hit them before they're ready," he said. Zyra nodded. "I can disable their shields from the inside, but I'll need a small team to get me aboard the flagship." Jack didn't hesitate. "I'm coming with you." The room fell silent, the other resistance members exchanging uneasy glances. "It's suicide," one of them muttered. Jack shook his head. "It's the only chance we've got. If we can disable their shields, we give Earth a fighting chance." Zaira placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch lingering longer than necessary. "Then let's make it count." As night fell, the final battle began. The human resistance moved like shadows through the ruined streets, their makeshift weapons clutched tightly in their hands. Overhead, the Zorethian warships rumbled, their spotlights slicing through the darkness in search of prey. Zaira and Jack led a small team toward the Zorethian flagship, slipping past patrols and dodging drone scouts. The air was thick with tension, every step a gamble between life and death. When they reached the base of the massive ship, Zaira activated a hidden panel, revealing a maintenance hatch. "This is it," she whispered. "Once we're inside, there's no turning back." Jack gave her a small, reassuring smile. Wouldn't have it any other way. They climbed into the ship, moving through dark corridors that hummed with alien energy. Zaira navigated the maze-like interior with ease, her intimate knowledge of the ship's layout guiding them closer to the control room. But as they rounded a corner, they were ambushed. Zorethian soldiers poured into the corridor, their weapons blazing. The team scattered, taking cover behind metal crates and support beams. Jack fired back, his shots precise, but the enemy was relentless. Zaira fought with a fury she had never known before. Every strike of her blade, every blast from her weapon, was fueled not by duty, but by purpose. She was no longer fighting for an empire. She was fighting for Earth, for Jack, for herself. But just as they cleared the last of the soldiers, the doors to the control room slid open, revealing Prince Farron. He stepped forward, his expression cold and merciless. "I gave you a chance, Zaira, but now I'll do what you couldn't." Zaira squared her shoulders, her blade humming with energy. "You'll have to get through me first." Farron lunged, and the siblings clashed in a brutal, deadly dance. Their blades sparked in the dim light, each strike echoing through the ship like thunder. Jack watched, helpless, as Zaira fought her brother. He wanted to help, but he knew this was her battle. Finally, with a swift, decisive move, Zaira disarmed Farron, her blade at his throat. But she didn't kill him. "You don't win by becoming them," she whispered, stepping back. Farron glared at her, but said nothing as Zaira turned to Jack. "Now," she said, "let's finish this." Together, they disabled the ship's shields, sending a signal to the human resistance. Outside, the sky lit up as Earth's forces launched a counterattack. The Zorethian ships, vulnerable without their shields, began to fall. As the flagship shook with explosions, Jack grabbed Zaira's hand. "Time to go," he shouted. They ran through the crumbling corridors, escaping just as the ship erupted in flames. On the ground, the humans cheered as the Zorethian fleet retreated, their invasion crushed by the very people they had underestimated. Zaira stood beside Jack, watching the sunrise over a battered but free Earth. "You did it," Jack said softly. "No," Zaira replied, a small smile on her lips. "We did it." For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged. And she knew this was just the beginning. The rise of humanity. When hope seems lost, humanity rises. The first light of dawn painted the sky in soft hues of gold and pink, a gentle contrast to the chaos that had engulfed Earth just hours before. The Zorethian fleet lay in ruins, their once mighty warships smoldering wrecks scattered across the horizon. The echoes of battle had faded, replaced by the cautious silence of a world unsure if the nightmare had truly ended. Princess Zaira stood atop a hill overlooking the city of New Haven, her golden eyes reflecting the sunrise. The scars of battle marked her armor, and the weight of her choices pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had turned her back on her empire, betrayed her own blood, and stood alongside the very species she was sent to conquer. But as she watched the survivors emerge from the rubble, families reuniting, Children laughing despite the destruction, strangers embracing as allies. She felt something she had never known in the Zorathian Empire. Belonging. Beside her, Sergeant Jack Carter was silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The weariness in his eyes couldn't mask the quiet pride he felt. They had done the impossible. "You still think humans are weak?" Jack asked, his voice low but tinged with humor. Zaira turned to him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "No, you're the strongest beings I've ever met." Jack chuckled softly, but there was a seriousness beneath his words. "Strength isn't just about power. It's about heart. And you've got plenty of that, Princess." The title felt different now. It wasn't a symbol of dominance or fear. It was a reminder of who she had been and how far she had come. But their victory wasn't complete. Not yet. Later that day, as the survivors gathered in the remains of the city square, Jack stood before them, his voice carrying over the crowd. "We fought hard," he began, his gaze sweeping over the faces of those who had lost everything but their will to survive. "We've lost friends, family, homes, but we've proven something today, not just to the Zorathians, but to ourselves. We are more than just survivors. We are fighters. We are humanity." A cheer rose from the crowd, raw and powerful. Jack continued, his voice steady. "But the fight isn't over. The Zorathians will regroup. They'll come back. And when they do, we'll be ready. Because now, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every world that's been crushed under their empire." He turned to Zaira, extending his hand. "And we won't be fighting alone." Zaira stepped forward, her heart pounding. She looked out over the crowd, humans who had once seen her as an enemy, now looking to her as an ally. "I was born into an empire that believed fear was the greatest weapon," she said, her voice clear and strong. "But you've shown me something stronger, hope. You've taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to stand and fight despite it." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I am Princess Zaira of the Zorathian Empire," she declared, "but today I stand with humanity." The crowd erupted, their cheers shaking the ground beneath them. For the first time in her life, Zaira felt free. But the peace was short-lived. That night, as the stars blinked quietly in the sky, a new threat emerged. A Zorathian stealth cruiser, previously hidden in Earth's orbit, descended silently into the atmosphere. Unlike the massive warships of the main fleet, this vessel was sleek, built for assassination and subterfuge. Inside, Prince Varin, Zaira's brother, seethed with rage. His defeat at the hands of his sister and a human was an insult he couldn't tolerate. "She thinks she's won," he snarled, his eyes burning with fury. "But she's forgotten one thing. Blood is stronger than loyalty." The ship landed under the cover of darkness, and Varin led his elite soldiers into the heart of New Haven. Zaira woke to the sound of distant explosions. She grabbed her weapon and sprinted through the shattered streets, her heart pounding in her chest. When she reached the city square, chaos greeted her. Buildings burned, and the once celebrating crowd was now a scattered, terrified mob. In the center of it all stood Varin, his blade pressed against Jack's throat. "Hello, sister," Varin sneered, tightening his grip. "Did you really think you could betray the Empire and live?" Zaira stepped forward, her weapon raised. "Let him go, Varin. This is between you and me." Varin laughed coldly. "Oh, it's always been between us, hasn't it? You were always the favorite, the perfect warrior. But now you're just a traitor." Zaira's grip tightened on her blade. "I may be a traitor to the Empire, but I'm true to myself. Can you say the same?" Varin's eyes darkened. "The Empire is who I am." With a roar, he lunged at Zaira, forcing Jack aside. Their blades clashed in a flurry of sparks, the battle fierce and personal. Each strike was fueled by years of rivalry, betrayal, and pain. Zaira fought with everything she had, not for glory, but for the people who had shown her a new way to live. She matched Varin blow for blow, their duel lighting up the night. Finally, with a swift, decisive move, Xyra disarmed her brother, her blade at his throat. But she didn't strike. "Do it," Varin spat, his pride bleeding from every word. "End it." Xyra shook her head. "No, that's not who I am anymore." She stepped back, lowering her weapon. "But you'll never hurt them again." Varin's soldiers, seeing their leader defeated, surrendered. The battle was over. As the sun rose over New Haven once more, Xyra stood beside Jack, watching the city come back to life. "You could have killed him," Jack said quietly. Xyra nodded. "But then I'd be no better than the empire I left behind." Jack smiled, his eyes reflecting the first true peace they'd both felt in days. "You're more human than you think." Xyra laughed softly, the sound foreign but comforting. "Maybe humanity isn't just about being human." She looked at the horizon, where the first light of a new day broke through the clouds. "It's about rising, no matter how many times you fall." And as Earth rebuilt, so did she, piece by piece, heart by heart. The Empire had tried to conquer humanity. But in the end, it was humanity that had conquered her. The end.